What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network. Real excited to bring you our 6th annual Propapalooza episode covering all things prop betting for Super Bowl 58. Reminder to use bonus code ACTION when signing up at BetMGM to get up to $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Today, I'll be joined, as always, by my co-host, the odds maker, the most accurate projector in the game, Actions Director of Predictive Analytics, Sean Koerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? I'm not sure what I'm more excited about, giving out some Super Bowl props or having the band back together with Freedman, joining us for the show.
Yeah, I was going to give Freedman the whole intro, but you just kind of spoiled it for us. So without further ado, special guest on today's show, old friend of the show, head of betting at Fantasy Life, Mr. Matthew Freedman. What's up, Freedman? We missed you.
Yeah, it's good to be back on the show. I think I've done every Propapalooza. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think it's like I have the right of first refusal. So even though I'm long gone, you guys bring me back. You suffered the indignity of having me on the show yet once more for the Propapalooza. But it's awesome to be back, and especially talking the Super Bowl, because this is the game. Like, we've got the full slate of the full menu of props, unlike anything that we see at any other game, any other time of the year. So this is fantastic. Really looking forward to talking about all these bets with you guys.
Yeah, we have the full menu of props. I'm sure Sean already moved the market on all of the punting props. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah, those are long gone.
Yeah, those are. Yeah.
But so we're gonna talk our two favorite each. So we'll have a little Sunday 6-pack here. We'll also talk some pregame exotics, some the MVP market, touchdowns, scoring props, quarters and stuff like that. We'll go player props, and we'll talk some other team props. So really just the entire menu, like you said, Freeman. But let's jump right into our Super Bowl Propapalooza 6-pack. Sean, I'll go you first with one. Freedman, I'll go, and then we'll run it back. So Sean, where are you going with the first pick of the Super Bowl 58 Propapalooza Sunday 6-pack?
Yeah, like Freeman said, it's a full menu of props. These are two bets I've never been able to make before. They're two interesting markets. And the first one, I'm going with who's going to have the most tackles and assists in this game. And I'm going with Jair Brown at 75-1. For those that don't know who he is the 49ers rookie safety.
This is a great bet. Sorry,
I had to give it out. I have to give it out because it's going to move. It should be 75-1. It should be closer to 15-1 odds. And don't even take my word for it. Just look at the tackles and assist props. You'll see Fred Warner, Nick Bolton, Dre Greenlaw. They're way up there. They should absolutely be the top 3 favorites in this market. The next 2 up are both safeties for each team, Justin Reed and Jair Brown. They both have, tackles, assist prop closer to 6. Reed is plus 850 and Brown is plus 7,500. So that's everything you need to know right there. And my tackle and assist projections favor, the linebackers a bit more. So I have this closer to 20-1 odds. But like I said, if you just use the market for this, he's 15-1 implied. And, last week, Brown had 10 tackles. I think there was a path for him to actually take this down. He had 10 tackles last week. A big part of that was, he was involved in tackling Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle, and, tackling Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs when they got in the second level, which happened pretty frequently. That could happen here with, Isaiah Pacheco getting the second level on his runs, Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice over the middle getting a ton of catches. So this sets up perfectly for Brown. So I'm taking him to lead the game in tackles and assists at 75-1.
Love it. All right. Freedman, I don't know how you follow that up, but what you got for your first pick of the 6-pack?
Impossible to follow that up. And I'll just say, I absolutely love that, because he's also going to be the guy who is charged with providing a lot of defense against Travis Kelce. And I think Kelsey's going to be targeted a lot in this game. So that could be, all the more reason for why Brown ends up getting some extra tackles there. So love that one. Absolutely love it. I'm looking at, I mean, guys, do you remember when we had this matchup? Not exactly the same matchup, but these two teams in the Super Bowl 4 years ago. And a lot of the sports books were putting out fantasy point props. That was like the golden era, because like if it's hard enough for books to price accurately player props, it is all the harder for them to price fantasy point props. And, you know, not many books do it anymore, but a number of books will do it for the Super Bowl. And I'm looking at Patrick Mahomes under 21.5 fantasy points is something that is out there. And in the Fantasy Life bet tracker, I put this in there at -110. I still see it at -140 around the market. I still think it is bettable at that number. If you look at what Patrick Mahomes did in the 16 regular season games, he went over this number just 3 times. In the postseason, the highest he's had is 18.6, which, by the way, is where I have this projected right now. The last time he went over 21.5 was week 7, when he was going against the Chargers, who gave him 400 yards and 4 touchdowns passing through the air. Like, the 49ers are not nearly as bad as the Chargers. The 49ers, in their 18 real games this year, so not counting week 18 when they were resting a lot of players, in their 18 games against starters, they've allowed a guy to go over 21.5 fantasy points just 5 times. So I think this is a relatively tough matchup for Mahomes. And I think the Chiefs aren't all that inclined to throw the ball all that much anyway in this spot. So I really like the under 21.5 fantasy points. And I also kind of want to highlight it, not just because I think it's exploitable, but also like it is just like the prop that Sean mentioned. It is typical of like the types of opportunities that we have for the Super Bowl. Like, it's not just, is this guy going to have, higher, or like, is he going to go more than like 21.5 rushing yards or something like that? Like, we can talk about like all types of props for this game. So fantasy points, we're all like fantasy guys. Patrick Mahomes under 21.5 fantasy points. I just absolutely bet this. And as Raybon used to say, maybe he still says this, I would bet this to almost any juice.
Yeah, I'd still say that. And I mean, I have it almost 2 points under as well. I think you have it like 3 points under, but yeah, this number is way too high. So I love this one. All right. Well, mine is not quite as exciting as y'all, but this is my favorite prop. So I'm gonna give it out. Mahomes not to throw a pick. And it's pretty evenly juiced on both sides. I think this should be more like -150. If you look at his career, he's thrown a pick in exactly half of his regular season games, but only 4 of his 17 postseason games. He hasn't thrown a pick in each of his last 6 playoff games. And if you look at how he's playing now, his average depth of target this year has ticked under 7, which is crazy, but it's because Rashee Rice has become such a high volume target, and his average depth of target is like 5. And they're also not playing Tony, Hardman, Ross, and Sky Moore many snaps. They only played 1 snap outside of kneel downs. Well, those guys are responsible for 7 picks on the year that are just probably not going to get any routes run. And then you just look at how Mahomes has been playing as of late. He hasn't had a turnover worthy throw in 4 weeks. That's the longest stretch of his career. And just like the refs might give him some help too. Since he came into the league, Mahomes has over 50 overturned picks. No one else has even 10. So, the refs, people always complaining about him. That might be a little extra to overturn if he does throw one. So for all those reasons, like Mahomes, not to throw a pick, we bet it up to 150, -150. All right. Sean, pick number 4, your second of the Super Bowl 58 Propapalooza 6-pack. Where are you going?
All right. So this is a market I've never been able to bet before until now. But I'm going with Richie James to have the most punt return yards in this game at -110. His main competition in this game is Ray-Ray McCloud, who is also -110. It's very likely that these two guys are the only ones who return a punt, although more on that in a bit. I think we can treat both these returners as pretty even in terms of how many yards they'll get per return. But I dug into the numbers. I already did the punting props, of course. And I looked at the return percentage. And I think that Richie James is more likely to have 2 returns here, and Ray-Ray McCloud more likely to have just 1 return here. which is going to be absolutely massive for this market. But, roughly 42% of punts have been returned this year. Ray McLeod was very aggressive. He returned 51% of his punts this year, while Richie James returned 47 of his punts. But I dug in a little deeper and I looked at the punts they saw, and Ray actually had a very easy schedule when it comes to punts. So he was actually expected to see an above average return rate, whereas Richie James had a very tough schedule. So it was actually incredible that he was way above league average. So going forward, I would expect James to have about a 7% more likely return rate than Ray McLeod against an average punter. But this isn't even an average matchup of punters. San Francisco punter Mitch Wishnowsky saw 44% of his punts returned, so above league average. And that's because he tends to just boom it at a lower angle. His hang time isn't that high, which is really good, for returns. Whereas Kansas City's punter, Tommy Townsend, only had 32% of his punts returned. He tends to have one of the highest hang times year over year, and he doesn't punt it as far. So typically his punts are fair caught. So just based on that, I think James has a much better shot of getting 2+ punt returns. Whereas, Ray, like I said, closer to 1. And as I alluded to, I think Richie James is going to get every single punt return the Chiefs have to offer. I don't think they're going to throw Mecole Hardman or, God forbid, Kadarius Toney back there to return punts. But on the Niners side, there has been situations in the past where they have a big game like this and they let Debo return a punt or two. If that were to happen, just the odds on this are going to be way more in favor of Richie James. I'm not assuming Debo having a return here, and I'm still showing Richie James closer to a 60% chance to take down this market.
I mean, you know me, anytime I can fade Ray McLeod, I'm going to do it.
For sure.
Love it. Freedman, what do you got?
Okay. That was an awesome one. I can't approach it in terms of probably like plus EV, but the one that I'm looking at right now is, I'd say, even further off the board in terms of props that people would think of. I'm looking at Marquez Valdes-Scantling, longest air yards from a single reception. And this is available at plus 980. And I just feel like that is outrageous. Brandon Ayuk is favored within this market. He should be. Justin Watson is not all that far behind, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling at plus 980 is, I think, really wrong when you take into account that last week he had a 96% route rate in the AFC Championship. Raybon, I believe you mentioned this previously on a show with Stuckey. Like, we have seen Marquez Valdes-Scantling really cement his role within that offense, which is pushed to the side. Mecole Hardman, like, he's basically been banished. Kadarius Toney is missing in action. Sky Moore is injured. And Richie James is a very distant number 4 wide receiver. So MVS, if he's out there running over 90% of the routes, and he leads both teams with a 17.7 yard ADOT, he doesn't need all that many targets to have a really good chance of leading the game with air yards on a single reception. So that is where I'm going. Longest air yards from a single reception, MVS at plus 980.
Yeah, I like that, because I think MVS is the one guy where, for the most part, I think we kind of know how the playing time is going to break down. But with MVS, it's like 96% last game was the highest of the year. Now, most likely, that was the most important game of the year, so has a good chance of repeating. But I think, from a projection standpoint, most people are probably doing it a little more conservative and projecting him for like 85% or something like that. So I think there's a little value on like all of his overs, because he has that upside to essentially play every snap, which only increases, the amount of dropbacks he's going to be on, the amount of chances he has to get like that long air yard catch. So I like that. All right. For my third pick, my second and the 6th overall of the Super Bowl 58 Propapalooza 6-pack, I'm going with Eli Mitchell under 1.5 carries. This guy had no running back snaps in the playoffs until the end of the conference championship game, where Christian McCaffrey just landed on his head. And I don't think in the Super Bowl that Kyle Shanahan plans to get McCaffrey, take McCaffrey off the field. And if he does, I think there's a really decent chance that Deebo Samuel could actually be the backup running back. So I doubt that Mitchell sees any carries. I mean, that's been kind of in the important games this year. We've really seen Shanahan not take McCaffrey off the field, whether it be Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell backing him up. So I think, he had, a handful of carries in that conference championship. So books are setting his number at 1.5, but a half is probably a fairer one, because I don't think he's getting in the game unless there's an injury. And that's what this is kind of accounting for. So Elijah Mitchell under 1.5 carries. All right. So let's recap this 6-pack real quick. So Sean, you had most tackles and assists, Jair Brown, and then Richie James to beat Ray McLeod in punt return yardage. Freedman, you had Mahomes under 21.5 fantasy points and MVS longest air yards from a single reception. And I had Mahomes under a half an interception and Eli Mitchell under 1.5 carries. All right, let's get into some fun stuff. Just some more game props that we like. We'll start with pregame exotics. Either of you guys have anything on that one?
No, I usually just tell your national anthem prop,
Yeah.
So I'm waiting to hear it.
Okay, so I think right now I'm seeing the number for the amount of seconds that Reba McEntire takes for this national anthem in the 80s, in the high 80s still. I would bang that over. In the last 16 Super Bowls, the average has been 119 seconds. The median has been 117 seconds. And McEntire is fast, but this happens every year because we've been doing this for a few years now. And every year people are trying to time the individual singer who's singing it based on their past renditions. And every single time it results in I think a soft number in the market because it's the Super Bowl. They're always going to go a lot longer. So just to put that in perspective, I'm seeing the number at 86 or 87.5 at most books. The national anthem over the last 16 Super Bowls has never been shorter than 90 seconds. 75% of the time, it's been at least 110 seconds. So I think that, yes, she might be on the quicker end, but I don't think she's going anywhere under 90. And if I had to guess, I think she would still go over 100, just because that's what we've kind of seen in the past with some of these singers who have, really short renditions otherwise. So I'm banging this over 87.5 seconds for the national anthem.
Nice.
I love this. When you mentioned before the show that this number was 87.5, I could not believe it, because typically it's way higher. Like, even if you are adjusting for the idea of, okay, a country singer, maybe she sings a little bit faster, like old woman lungs, maybe she doesn't have like the breath capacity for it to be like a longer
well,
song.
damn.
Wow.
Like,
not old man, just old woman. Like, damn.
I'm just
bro.
saying, even if you're making those, even if you're making those adjustments. Even if you're making those adjustments, this number's off. So yeah, absolutely agree.
And I don't think she's going to get too nervous and rush it, like nerves as a factor. I don't think she's going to have any of those.
No, it's like I've seen this every year. I mean, I think the books are kind of going off the past renditions, which I don't think is the proper way to kind of handicap this market. But let's get into to more bets that actually have to do with the game. And everyone's favorite is always the Super Bowl MVP. So Sean, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the MVP market? If you had to make a bet, who's your choice?
Yeah, so I don't have any official plays for this market. Obviously it's usually going to be a quarterback, but they're so juiced down, I don't see any value there. So I think if we're going to take a long shot on somebody like our T. Higgins 60-1 from a few years ago, I'm going to have to go with Deebo Samuel. You can get him at 33-1 right now. Wide receiver has won this in 2 of the past 5 seasons. Cup won it in 2022. But if the Bengals hung on one, that would have been T. Higgins, because he had 2 touchdowns in that game. One of them was a pass from Joe Mixon. So that was key. He had 2 touchdowns. One of them wasn't even from Joe Burrow. I think that's the path that Deebo has to MVP, right? So, he could have a big game as a receiver, but also potentially as a runner. So if he ends up getting 30+ rushing yards and a rushing touchdown and a normal Deebo receiving line, he would definitely be at the top of the list for MVP. I could see them giving it to him over Brock Purdy. So that's why I think, it's hard to say there's like a ton of value here, but I think he's definitely worth a flyer, at least at 33-1.
Yeah, and like he hasn't had one of those games yet this year where he's had like the 10 rushing attempts. That could be coming in the Super Bowl. I mean, that's the talk. Is like, can Kansas City's run defense hold up? So I wouldn't be surprised if Debo sets a season high in carries for this game, which obviously helps him because it also has leverage on McCaffrey in that case, right? Like if Debo gets a rushing touchdown or something, that's going to directly hurt McCaffrey. But with that being said, Freedman, I know you like McCaffrey, right? So talk to me about him.
Yeah, I mean, I lean towards McCaffrey. I haven't bet it, and so I think the bigger picture is that, I guess two things in terms of McCaffrey. I think the general thesis during the season that a lot of MVP voters held against Purdy was that McCaffrey is the more important player within that offense, and that general idea could still hold during this game. But kind of big picture, I generally don't want to be betting in the MVP market when I could be betting in like on an SGP and kind of thinking about like, what are the things that need to happen for this guy to have a realistic chance of winning the MVP? And if I go to an SGP and I type those things in and I get better odds on the SGP, then I'll just bet the SGP. And if I don't get better odds, then I would bet the MVP. But almost universally, you get better odds betting the thesis through an SGP. So for instance, let's say you like Christian McCaffrey. Right now, he's around plus 450 to win MVP in the Super Bowl. Like, what are the things that need to happen for him to win MVP? Well, the 49ers need to win. He needs to score at least a touchdown. He probably needs to go over like 120-ish scrimmage yards. And I would say Brock Purdy probably needs to have, I would say, under 1.5 touchdowns. Like, that's not like all necessary, but like that general thing gets you in the direction of McCaffrey winning MVP. And if you put all that together, that's like 8-1. And depending on where you're looking. So I would just say, if you have a thesis about why a guy might win MVP, just think about it, play it out, and put it into an SGP and see if you get better odds.
I did not have like over 1.5 mentions of the word thesis on my bingo card for this show, but
well, I did with Freedman on. Yeah, it was minus 200.
Oh, that's why you're the odds maker.
He's the odds maker. Yeah.
I like both of those, and I'll talk about a couple of Chiefs guys because I think the Chiefs are a little undervalued in the market, just on the spread itself. So naturally, I think they're going to be some slight value on some of their players in the MVP market. I think the first is obviously Travis Kelce. If you're looking, to pivot off of Mahomes, he's had a touchdown in 8 of his last 9 playoff games, 13 of 17 with Mahomes, 18 touchdowns in 17 total playoff games with Mahomes. And then San Francisco's defense, they have good numbers against tight end, but I think that's a little bit overstated because if you look at the good tight ends they face, Sam Laporta, 9 catches for 97 yards, Trey McBride, 10 for 102, and Hawkinson, 11 for 86. So I don't think that Kelce's just going to be shut down or anything like that. We saw him catch the first touchdown in the year for a tight end on Hamilton. So I'm not too scared of a guy like Fred Warner or something like that. I think Kelce's still going to win his fair share of routes. And then if you look at how could a pass catcher win instead of Mahomes if the Chiefs win? Well, look at last year. He went 21 of 27 in the Super Bowl for 182, but he had 3 touchdowns. But we know touchdowns are kind of volatile. So if he only has let's say 1 touchdown and it's Kelce and Kelce goes over 100 or something like that, it could very well be Travis Kelce. So, and another thing that I noticed is if there's ever a time where you get like fatigue of a quarterback, it's usually that third one after they win 2, and Mahomes has already won 2. When Brady won 2, Deion Branch won the third, and then Brady won 2 more with the Patriots, and then Edelman wins 1. So this has been the time if you're looking for a precedent for a pass catcher to win, even if you have like a legendary all-time quarterback winning. And then the other guy is Rashee Rice, and he's got much better odds. He's 60-1, and his numbers, if you look at his receiving yardage in the market, his prop is about 5 fewer yards than Kelce, and his receptions are pretty much equal, right around 6.5. So really, you're just looking at touchdown variance if you're looking at kind of like the same reasoning as Kelce. And Rashee Rice, I mean, this guy, it's kind of going under talked about, but like he has no relation to Jerry Rice, right? in Jerry Rice's first 3 postseason games, he had not even half as many receiving yards as Rashee. Like Rashee Rice has 10 more catches, over 100 more yards than Jerry Rice in his first 3 playoff games. So this guy's a baller. I think he could easily win it. He's averaging 6 catches for 70 yards since week 6. So I think there's a lot of value on him, even compared to Kelsey. But I really like kind of hedging them both, taking Kelsey and taking Rice as a way to kind of look at the Chiefs, a Chiefs pass catcher, not Mahomes, getting it. So those are my 2 favorite MVP bets.
Yeah, I like that. I'll say I had the same general idea with Kelsey, but I put it in an SGP. And so like what I did was betting the Chiefs to win, betting Kelsey to score a touchdown, Kelsey to go over 100 yards, and then taking the under on Mahomes' passing yards. So under 261.5. And like that gets you some really big inverse correlation that results in 32-1 odds. So like I see the path. Like you could easily see how it happens.
Yeah, and you could do a couple of them, because you could do another one where it's like Kelsey to score 2 touchdowns and kind of do it like maybe not the 100 yards, but the 2 touchdowns or something like that. And I will say this too, another Chief who I think, and running backs never win it, but this Chiefs team is so unlike and I'd say the Niners too. They are good defensive teams. They have quarterbacks that obviously can put up big numbers, but there's also a scenario where like Isaiah Pacheco scores 2 or 3 touchdowns. And like we saw that with Damian Williams and he didn't get it. But that don't. Yeah, I know. But like that was Mahomes had Tyreek and they still put up big numbers. But there's a chance, like Mahomes, as you mentioned, Freedman, he hasn't really been putting up massive numbers this year, and he hasn't had to because of the defense. So if the defense plays well, Mahomes doesn't put up massive numbers, and Pacheco gets, let's say, both of the Chiefs touchdowns and they win like 17-14 or something like that, it's going to be hard not to give it to him. So he's 28-1. Another guy I would consider in this market, or go like the Freedman SGP route and kind of get yourself to a Pacheco as well.
There are still multiple times a year that I have this quick thought of like, I can't believe Damian Williams didn't win Super Bowl MVP 4 years ago. Like it's still something that just like flashes through my brain.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was kind of the way things unfolded late too, with Mahomes hitting Hill for that big catch. Yeah. And, it was a lot playing into that. All right, let's go to touchdown markets. These are always, I would say, kind of tough for us because, as guys who project these things out, I would say the touchdown markets tend to be a little overjuiced, but it is a Super Bowl. It is kind of fun to kind of find some long shots here, or just some guys that we think are good values or decent values, because we know people are going to bet them. So Sean, you're up first. What do you like in this market, in either anytime or first touchdown or whatever you may?
Yeah, so like you said, this is a market that I think is pretty sharp. So it's hard to find too much value, especially on the studs that you'd like to bet on. But I do have a lean on a long shot. I think Noah Gray at plus 950 is offering some value. He has 2 touchdowns this year, and while he's, clearly Travis Kelce's backup, he is on the field a lot more than your typical backup tight end in the red zone. The Chiefs use 2 tight end personnel at the 8th highest rate in the red zone, 3 tight end personnel at the 4th highest rate in the red zone. And with Joe Thuney, it sounds like he's going to be out. I could see them leaning towards more heavy personnel at times in this game. And Andy Reid, he likes to get creative in the red zone, and Gray's the type of guy where, could benefit from San Francisco, putting too many resources on, Kelsey or Rice. So they could have a sort of a trick play designed for Gray near the red zone. Either way, I have him projected closer to plus 700. Like you said, it's usually hard to find value on this, but I think, Noah Gray at plus 950 is offering some value here.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, like you said, the Chiefs have increased their heavy personnel a lot. And I think he's actually, because I initially thought that it was like just early in games, but they've actually increased it a lot too later in games when they're leading. So it's another one of those things you could also parlay, or like his last touchdown odds are also interesting, because usually tight ends, heavy personnel guys, you're thinking early in the game, and like 4th receivers, 5th receivers, you're thinking late, teams are coming back, but the Chiefs have been using that personnel late in games too. So, but yeah, I like Noah Gray as well. Freedman, what are you thinking?
All right, I'm going to be chalky. Christian McCaffrey. Like his odds are -110 to -210 to -225. And I have this projected around -275. And I will just say, I feel like this has been a little bit of a cheat code throughout the season, where it's like McCaffrey has just almost never been priced high enough in this market. And it's like that meme of like the genius on one side of the spectrum and like the idiot on the other side, and they both have the same opinion. Like I feel like people could, like who are sharp bettors and then like square bettors could both get to Christian McCaffrey, because like the square better could just be like, oh, Christian McCaffrey, he scores a touchdown every game, and the sharp better could be like, oh, Christian McCaffrey, like he has such outstanding work inside the 5-yard line, and like point out everything about the 49ers in terms of like the metrics that explain why Christian McCaffrey scores so many touchdowns. But I think he's a near or as close of a lock as anyone can get to scoring a touchdown in any given game. So Christian McCaffrey at -220, I think there's value there. And I'll say, if you don't like laying that much juice, totally understandable. I think there's actually a way of leveraging this even more, of parlaying Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown and taking the under on his scrimmage yardage. So 131.5 scrimmage yards. And I would say, like, normally there is correlation, not normally, there is correlation between yards and touchdowns. But with someone like McCaffrey and with a scrimmage yardage total that high, the correlation is much weaker. And like what really matters for Christian McCaffrey is not the number of yards he gets in this game, but like the number of opportunities he gets inside the 5-yard line. And that is basically uncorrelated with the number of yards that he gets across the game. And I'll just say, like, even if McCaffrey has a subpar game where he has like 120 yards or something like that, he still has a really good chance of scoring a touchdown. So McCaffrey in the 8 games this year in which he had fewer than 130.5 scrimmage yards, he still scored a touchdown in all of those games but one. So I think there's pretty decent opportunity here. I got this at +219, Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown, and under on the scrimmage yardage of 131.5. So I think Christian McCaffrey on his own to score a touchdown is fine. If you don't want to pay the heavy juice on that, I think parlaying that with the under on his scrimmage yardage is a way of bumping this up to like +210, +220 to make it a little bit more palatable, but still getting some value there.
Yeah, I mean, this guy scored in 15 out of 18 games. So he is, I mean, like you said, the nearest to a lock. And the books are in a tough spot with McCaffrey too, because they want to still take action on it, but they don't want to juice it up so high, that it's like people don't want to touch it. So I think it's, it's not too crazy. I have it like a probably fair value just under -200, but I mean, we're talking like a couple of cents of juice here. Another guy like that for me is Travis Kelce. You could get him at even money, and I think the market is just kind of saying, oh, San Francisco's really good against tight ends, but they haven't really been great against good tight ends. And Kelce still scored in 13 out of 17 with Mahomes, 8 of the last 9 playoff games. So still like his odds of getting in the end zone. I think usually you'd see a guy like Kelce, he would be, -150 or something like that. But because of just the season he's had, he hasn't really played the amount of snaps that he's been playing in the postseason for much of the year. He didn't even clear like a 90% route rate, I think, until after the bye this year. So I think you're getting a little value there. But as far as long shots, I think Richie James is interesting because I was at that Super Bowl last year. I watched Sky Moore score his first touchdown of the season on his only catch of the game as the number 4 receiver for Kansas City. I watched Kadarius Toney, who barely played on offense. I think he was the number 5 wide receiver. He scored a receiving touchdown in that game as well. So Richie James, he played 17 snaps, ran 8 routes as the number 4 wide receiver in the conference championship. McCole Hardman only 1 snap. Justin Ross, no snaps outside of the kneel down. So Richie James seems like he's locked into that number 4 role. And that with Andy Reid kind of scheming things up, if Kelce doesn't, if Mahomes throws one and it's not Kelce, obviously it could be Rice, but defenses are obviously going to pay the most attention. It could be a random guy like Richie James. So
hopefully he just returns a punt for a touchdown.
Yeah, I was about to say, and he gets a couple extra cracks. Extra cracks if he gets some punts. So 11-1. I think those are fun odds. And one other guy I'll mention, kind of going off your Noah Gray prop, Sean, is Blake Bell at 30-1. He, Kansas City's not only increasing their 1-2 personnel, but their 1-3, which is 3 tight ends on the field. And I think another important thing for Blake Bell, because you mentioned, these guys are going to be used in the red zone the most. That's where you start seeing like the third tight end coming in. Kansas City doesn't sneak at the goal line because Kansas City doesn't sneak, right? So that because they don't sneak, they have to think of other ways to kind of other plays to draw up. And we've seen Blake Bell in the past actually get a quarterback sneak, like a tush push. Same thing with Noah Gray. So I think that's where some hidden value is, in addition to just like a little play action to Pacheco or whoever, and just launch it up to Bell, who no one even knows is on the field. So if I like both backup tight ends, all 3 tight ends for the Chiefs. Kelsey, Gray, and Bell. One of those guys.
I love this. The Belldozer, former college quarterback. Richie James in the hashtag revenge game going against the 49ers. And by the way, Raybon, you mentioned the 49ers against tight ends, and you mentioned earlier Trey McBride and Sam Laporta. The 49ers have not been nearly as good against tight ends after they lost Hufanga. I think that was in like week 11.
Yep.
And that's why Jair Brown is on the field really in the first place. And like he's been exploitable going against like tight ends. There's no one else like Kelsey, but McBride and Laporta are the guys most like Kelsey since Hufanga was injured. And those guys just absolutely went off. So like, I mean, that goes to your Kelsey scoring a touchdown. It goes to Kelsey MVP. Like I think if the Chiefs have a big game, a lot of it is because of Kelsey in this spot.
Yeah. And that's why I like, the hedge with Rashee Rice for MVP, just because, his odds are so long that if this doesn't happen, but Mahomes is still Mahomes, it's probably going to be Rice. Although MVS, if he runs those 196 routes, maybe we should be considering him too. But let's go to scoring props by quarter. This sounds like a Sean thing. So Sean, what do you got here?
I think it's really, I just took liberty of just props by quarter.
Okay.
And I took a couple earlier in the week. They were offering first quarter receiving yards, which I've seen at times. It's not common, and usually it's just for studs, but I saw Justin Watson at 3.5 yards, and I did a double take. It's like they took his full game projection divided by 4. And there you go. There's his first quarter receiving yards. So I hammer the under for him and Juwan Jennings. I haven't seen Juwan Jennings up yet, but just look for him to come back. Watson's down to -180, but I still like it there. As you guys would say, I'd bet that down to any juice. But when it comes to Watson, the full game, he's closer to 1.6 receptions, so about 0.4 for the first quarter, using the back of the napkin math here. But that's only about a 34% chance he'll even catch a pass in the first quarter. So this prop should really be just over under a half yard with the under, -200 or something like that. But they gave us 3 free yards too. He has 3 catches this year out of his 30 catches that have gone for 3 yards or less. So we're getting a little cushion there. But, just to take it a step further, he only has 4 catches in the first quarter all year. Usually when he is getting receptions is the second quarter in the 2-minute offense. So I'm already projecting this at like -230. And if you just factor in the fact that he doesn't see many targets in the first quarter, it should be closer to like -300. So I still like it -180. And again, keep an eye out on Juwan Jennings prop. They might float it back up there at some point. And if it's at 3.5, hammer the under.
Yeah, I think the Watson makes a lot of sense because for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's much better against man coverage. San Francisco plays mostly zone. I think you're going to have to get them out of their zone, like the Lions did. So if it's probably not going to happen by the first quarter. Then the other thing, and you saw this last week, Sean, Watson got like his second catch was like behind the line of scrimmage. He got wiped away, but that's been a trend, right? Yeah, that's been a trend though, because with Rice playing so well, his average after target, remember, it's like 5, and he's a high volume guy getting like a 8 under 5. I've actually went back and looked, and Watson's average up the target has come down a few yards. So like on the season, him and MVS are like, these both of their very deep targets, but Watson has actually come down a few yards as Rice has become like an every down player. So those two things, I think really kind of lend themselves to Watson not even catching a pass in the first quarter. But even if he does, you have that little extra cushion of maybe it's another one of those like cheap dump offs behind the, like a wide receiver screen or something like that. All right, let's go to just regular player props. Let's see who we got. So Freeman, you have more than Sean. So give me a couple here, and then I'm gonna go to Sean. He looks like he has 2, and then I'll come back to you for your last 2.
Okay, well, I took a glimpse in the outline earlier, and Sean had something in there about Pacheco, and I think it was a Pacheco versus Christian McCaffrey matchup. So I want to see what Sean has to say about this, because I like the Pacheco side of this. I got this at 23.5 yards, plus 23.5 for Pacheco. Minus 110, minus 115. And I think there's value there on Pacheco because both of these defenses are pretty vulnerable against the run. If you look at what Pacheco has done in the playoffs and what he's done since the bye week, which was in week 10, and you compare that to Christian McCaffrey in the playoffs, McCaffrey since the week 9 bye, Pacheco has actually out-carried McCaffrey on a per game basis. And if I like the Chiefs in this spot to win, but even if I, just think that this is a competitive game, not sure who wins, I think there's still a pretty decent chance that Pacheco and McCaffrey end up having roughly the same number of carries. And if that's the case, I think 23.5 is too big of a cushion to be giving to Pacheco. But I wonder if Sean has opinions on this, and maybe Sean sees it differently.
No, I was going with a different market completely. So I'm in agreement with your rushing yard prop, but I was going the receiving yard route, not to give too much away.
All right. Yeah. Go for it.
Oh, okay. So I'll just go to my Pacheco prop. So I'm going with under 23.5 receiving yards. It's a bit juicy at minus 175. But this is a prop where you can use my Super Bowl prop calculator that I gave out yesterday, where you can plug in any yardage, any lines, and get percent edge. And this is actually showing a bigger edge than under 16.5 receiving yards for Pacheco. Just getting those extra 7 yards is critical. And Pacheco's receiving usage went up way after Jerick McKinnon was placed on the IR back in week 16. His routes run rate was 40% with McKinnon active and 60% with McKinnon on IR. And McKinnon returned to practice. It sounds like he's going to play. So I think that if anything, he's going to eat into Pacheco's receiving usage. Even more reason for them to just give him every single rush attempt possible. But just factoring that in a bit, that lowers Pacheco's floor ceiling combo in this market. So, I'm projecting Pacheco closer to like minus 250 on this specific prop. If you would rather go the 16.5 under at minus 115, that's fine. But I'm just showing way more value getting these extra 7 yards and just paying, minus 175 juice on it.
Yeah, I think we started when we did early props, Sean, on that episode. I think one of the first ones I talked about was I like Pacheco to like finish with the most rushing yards. So Freedman, that kind of goes both of you. It kind of feeds into both of you. I think he's a little undervalued in the rushing market and maybe a little overvalued in the receiving market. Okay, Sean, you still have one more, right?
Yeah.
You have just go. Let's go ahead, and then we'll go back to Freedman. What do you got?
All right. So first of all, I loved Freeman's prop over like the longest air yard reception. I have a similar one. It's the same concept where they're going to use NextGen's stats for this, but it's who's going to be the fastest offensive ball carrier.
Ooh.
And call me crazy, but I'm going with Christian McCaffrey at plus 790. And this is a market where I went and I looked at who had the longest or the fastest like play in every game for both teams this year. And it looks like this is a top heavy market where it's going to be either Debo, Pacheco, Ayuk, Rice, or McCaffrey. That's it. Or, one of the punt returners if they do get a long punt return, but that's it really. And when you just look at the fair odds on that, most of these guys are getting 6-1 odds or better. So it's really take your pick. But I just think that Christian McCaffrey has the best value here. He has the fastest speed among all players on these teams at 20.93 miles per hour. He did that back in week 2 on a 51-yard carry. If anything, I would say Pacheco should actually be the slight favorite in this market. He has the most 20-plus mile-an-hour runs or catches this year. But just getting Christian McCaffrey at the tail end of this market at plus 790 feels a bit off. I think it should be closer to like plus 400. That's how much value I'm showing on this, but I love this one. I can't believe I get to take like a Christian McCaffrey long shot like this, but I think this is just a mispriced market.
Yeah, and he's gonna eat, like, he should get the most opportunities in the
Yes,
game to
yeah.
do this too, which
Yeah.
is massive in this market. Okay, Freedman, what else you got?
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that one, Sean. I have two Purdy props that are kind of correlated. It's not that I think Purdy is going to throw a ton of attempts in this game, but I do have him with more passing yards than Mahomes. Let me rephrase that. I have them projected very similarly, with Mahomes having a slight edge, but Purdy versus Mahomes, most passing yards, I can get Purdy at plus 125. And I think that is enough to make it compelling to take Purdy over Mahomes in that situation, especially if I think the Chiefs are going to win, which maybe then forces the 49ers to pass the ball a little bit more. And I also have Purdy throwing an interception at minus 115 odds. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on those two props there.
Yeah, no, I think the Chiefs are a little undervalued. So in that situation, I think game script would be working in your favor. And it's like, I think the market, that's probably why you're showing value too, relative to the market, because I think, when you look at the 49ers, they've had all these blowouts this year, right? So I don't even think Purdy's cleared like 30 pass attempts more than a handful of times all year long. So this is a game where you're playing what could be the most competitive game of the year. So yeah, I think there's a very good chance. And like we talked about last year in the Super Bowl, you would have never thought this, but I think Jalen Hurts had what, like 303 over 300, and Mahomes had a $182, and it was a 38-35 Chief win.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that this could that could hit.
And with the Purdy interception, with the Purdy interception, if you look in Raybon, I think you mentioned this in a previous show that you did, but if you look at the games in which he's really exploded, it's been when exploded in a bad way. It's been when he's going against really good defensive coordinators, and that's the situation that we have here. So, Purdy, normally he stays pretty clean, but when he's been challenged by a really sharp defensive mind, that's when we've seen him get a little bit dirty. And, over 0.5 interceptions at minus 115. I just think there's a little too much value there.
Yeah, his worst game. So 75% of his interceptions have come against Cleveland and Jim Schwartz, Baltimore and Mike McDonald, Minnesota and Brian Flores, and there's a fourth one in there, but
Cincinnati.
Cincy and Rumo, who's really good. Yeah. So all and over half of his turnover where he throws on the year too. So that's kind of been the thing. And Spagnuolo might be better than all those guys, especially when you're talking about playoff Spags, who famously helped shut down Brady in that undefeated season.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, were you saying something about you had?
I was saying I agree with that. I feel like Purdy's passing yard prop is a little bit low. I'm not really touching that, but I think it does make sense to take him, like against Mahomes, because the attempts will be there. It could be a potential trailing game script. And maybe his efficiency does take a hit, but he does seem like he has a really high floor in this game.
Yeah. Okay. I think you got one more, right, Freedman?
Yeah, one more. This is disgusting. It's a kicker prop, but look, I'm talking with Sean here, who's like just punting on punters. So, I can't get any more disgusting than that. But I will say Harrison Butker over 1.5 field goals. I have this projected close to 2. I have it projected at 2.1. So I think there's a little bit of value there. And we have seen Andy Reid recently in the playoffs, like the past 3 or 4 years, get a little more conservative with the decision making in the playoffs. So Butker has historically had more field goal opportunities in the playoffs, and he's got a sufficient leg. He's a pretty accurate kicker. So I think if he gets 2 field goal opportunities in the game, he's got a pretty good chance to converting both of them. So over 1.5 field goals for Harrison Butker.
Yeah, Andy Reid is notoriously conservative. Like, he's going to take the points if he gets the opportunity. So don't hate that at all, especially because I also think, again, the Chiefs are just a little bit undervalued in the market, which just bumps up Butker's field goal projection.
Yeah, and that was
a bit more.
I got that at minus 110, minus 115, and I think it's still bettable there.
I already gave a couple player props out in the 6-pack, but I want to talk about that. I was kind of thinking about, and then Sean, you mentioned that McKinnon's look like he's leaning toward playing. So I just want people to kind of be thinking about this now. Clyde Edwards-Helaire under 14.5 rushing plus receiving yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been essentially in a McKinnon light role, like not quite getting as many snaps as McKinnon, but he has been playing on some passing down, some third downs, and getting a carry here, carry there. But if McKinnon plays, Edwards-Helaire is probably active, but just doesn't play. I mean, there's a chance he could be a healthy scratch if P. Ryan is needed more in special teams, but more likely it's like he'll just be the number 3 running back, and he probably wouldn't even get an offensive snap if McKinnon was back. So and in the last game, in the last 2 games, he's had 3 touches. So he averages under 5 yards, like 4.7 a touch. So 3 touches is still under this number. It's still like around 14. So even if he has the normal role that he's had all postseason, he still has a decent chance of going under that. But if McKinnon is activated, then you're getting massive value. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Now,
you guys remember a few years ago, we were all excited about this guy, first round talent in the Chiefs offense. Now we're talking about him being a healthy scratch,
as he was last Super Bowl.
Right. I'm just saying. I think we were all 3 of us were very excited about this guy.
Yeah, man.
At one point,
pour one out for CEH. I mean, once we saw Pacheco though, Pacheco was like, all right, this guy's a baller too. And then who was it this year? Deneric Prince. That never came to fruition. But okay. Any other props we got? Sean, looks like you got another one.
Yeah, well, this is just a lean for me right now. It's not an official play yet, but the longest field goal under 47.5 yards. Based on the what's so funny?
I'm just laughing because Stuckey literally, I think, gave out over 47.5.
Oh,
so now I'm very interested. I want to see who has the better
well, this is just a lean. I've given out like 100 props so far. This hasn't made the cut yet, but just based on their data this year and how many field goals are expected to make, I'm just going off that. It's about a 62% chance of staying under. However, I haven't done my process of trying to prove myself wrong, where I eliminate a lot of bets, and sometimes I come out with a bet. I haven't gone through that process yet, but I was comfortable giving this out because I don't think this is going to move. But I will look into this. I'll get back to you, but I might be on the under. And I was going to say with Freedman, Butker is like an amazing kicker, but I don't think he's going to make 100% of his kicks over 40 yards going forward. So there could be some potential regression there. But again, this is a lean for me. As of now, it's not an official play yet.
Freedman, anything else on your end?
No, I think I'm good here. I mean, I just gave out a field goal prop. I feel like that should be the end of it for me.
All right, I'll close this out. I got a couple. One is one I did talk about earlier. I'm still seeing it at -115, and that's the Chiefs is the first team to use a challenge. Andy Reid the last 3 years has just more challenges, 0.28 per game to Shanahan's 0.2. So just by that, I think Reid is a little bit more likely. I think it's more like -140 that Reid is more likely. Now, it could very well push if no team uses a challenge, but I do think that Reid and the Chiefs are more likely to throw the flag first. And then one other one is, this is more like if you want to add it to like a same game parlay, but I think the 2-point conversion, for there not to be a successful one is underpriced. It's -350, but I think it should be -450. These teams have combined to go for 2 only once all year. And I'm obviously factoring in a bunch of regression. So I'm projecting Kansas City, like their normal rate to be about 7%, San Francisco about 6%. But then, and even with this game being, closer than the average game with just a 2-point spread and all that stuff, I'm still getting about an 82% chance of there not being a 2-point conversion. So I think it should be -450, just over -450. So it's one of those, I'm sure people aren't going to want to bet with all the juice, but if you want to add it to like a parlay, I think that has a pretty good shot at hitting as well.
I lied. I have one more, but it's more of a question. I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on this one. So I'm looking at MGM right now, and you can get at -375 touchback on the opening kickoff. And that one feels a little bit intriguing to me because both of these coaches are pretty conservative. I feel like they would both just be satisfied with like, hey, let's take the touchback at the 25 and start out from there and make sure that we don't get any bad field position or anything like that. And if you look at Butker, I think he has like an 87.5% touchback rate on his kicks, like a super powerful leg. Not the case for Moody, but earlier in the year, the 49ers were kind of experimenting with like trying to pin teams. So so Moody's touchback rate isn't really representative of the leg that he has. And then even if he doesn't have the leg of Butker, I think kicking to the Chiefs, they have only 12 kick returns this year. Like they are just like much more incentivized just to like take the yards at the 25 and start from there. So I feel like kind of regardless of whoever is kicking and receiving in this situation, we are likely to see a touchback. So minus 375. I know it's like heavy juice, but I kind of don't think it's heavy enough.
Yeah, it should probably be closer to minus 500 because we talked about this on the early prep episode too, Sean, but Moody, his first 68 kicks of the year, 46% of them were returned. Like, so you only got a touchback 54% of the time. And then his last 34 kicks, just 12 of them, 12% have been returned. So 88%, he's right in line with Butker. And then you factor in the elevation, indoors, and just like, you don't want to fumble the first kick return or something. So there's a good chance that both of these coaches are fairly conservative. They probably tell their guys like, just fair catch it. Let's live to see another day. So I think that one makes sense too. Another one of those things people probably aren't going to bet flat out, even though there is value, but definitely something you could throw in a parlay to kind of get yourself some more odds there. So I like that one.
Boom. There we go. I'm betting it.
Boom. All right. That is going to do it for us. Thank you, as always, for listening to our 6th annual Propapalooza episode. Thank you for hanging out with Koerner Freedman and I. As a reminder, if you're looking for our main betting preview episode with me and Stuckey, that's live right now on this channel. Stay tuned later this week. We'll have a final best bets episode as well. And that's going to do it for our Super Bowl 58 Propapalooza. It's presented by BetMGM. You can use bonus code ACTION, ACTION, when signing up for BetMGM to get up to $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Don't forget, more fantasy content from Sean and I. Our fantasy flex pod will have an episode out as well. You can visit actionnetwork.com for all of our NFL betting and fantasy content, fantasylabs.com for our DFS tools and models. Don't forget to check the Discord server as well. Link will be in the episode description. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matt F. the Oracle. You can find Sean at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon. That's X, formerly Twitter, I should say. And we're all at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Happy Super Bowl 58. Let's get this shmoney.